I stood in the doorway of my brand new 2-bedroom bungalow keys, still warm in my palm, watching my entire family storm up my front walkway with suitcases in hand. My mother's voice cut through the evening air like a blade. "Burley, thank goodness you bought something big enough for all of us." My stomach dropped as I realized what was happening. They hadn't come to congratulate me on my first home purchase. They'd come to move in. My brother Marcus grinned behind her, already calculating sleeping arrangements in his head. The chaos began before I could even process what was happening. My mother Patricia burst through my front door like she owned the place, dragging a massive floral suitcase behind her. My father Harold followed close behind, carrying what looked like half a household worth of belongings. But it was Marcus who made my blood run cold. He strolled in carrying his 3-year-old son Tyler on his shoulders, while his wife Cassidy pushed a stroller containing their 18-month-old daughter Emma. Finally, some space to breathe. Patricia announced, setting her suitcase down in the middle of my pristine living room. She looked around with the satisfied expression of someone surveying their new kingdom. "This will work perfectly for all of us." I watched in stunned silence as my family began spreading out through my home like they were claiming territory. Harold immediately started examining my furniture arrangement, muttering something about better traffic flow and optimizing the space. Cassidy had already found my bathroom and was changing Emma's diaper on my brand new cream-colored sofa. "Wait, what exactly is happening here?" I managed to stammer, still clutching my house keys. Marcus laughed like I'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Come on, Burley. We've been planning this for months, ever since I lost the construction job and we got that eviction notice. Mom told us you were buying a place big enough for everyone." My heart sank into my stomach. Months. "Of course, sweetheart," Patricia said, already rearranging my coffee table to make room for Tyler's toy trucks. "When you told us you were house hunting, we naturally assumed you were thinking about the family. You know how expensive housing has gotten. It just makes sense for us all to pool our resources." Harold nodded approvingly as he measured the distance between my couch and television. "Smart financial planning, Burley. Your marketing salary can easily cover the mortgage on a place this size, and we'll all contribute what we can." I felt the room spinning slightly. "But this is only a 2-bedroom house." "2 bedrooms is plenty," Patricia waved dismissively. "You can take the smaller room and Marcus and Cassidy can have the master with the babies. Your father and I will set up in the living room. Tyler loves sleeping bags anyway, don't you, sweetie?" Tyler had discovered my bookshelf and was systematically pulling volumes onto the floor. "Grandma, can I have my own corner for my toys?" "Of course, darling," Patricia beamed. "Aunt Burley has plenty of space for everyone." Cassidy looked up from the diaper-changing operation on my sofa. "This is so much better than that awful apartment we were in. Emma will love having a yard to play in once she starts walking more." I tried to find my voice again. "But I never said you could live here. I bought this house for myself." Harold stopped measuring and fixed me with a stern look that transported me straight back to childhood. "Burley family helps family. Your mother and I sacrificed plenty to put you through college. We took out a second mortgage on our house to pay for your education. Don't you think it's time you returned the favor?" The guilt hit me like a physical blow. It was true that my parents had struggled financially to support my education. I'd graduated debt-free because of their sacrifices. But this wasn't what I'd imagined when I thought about paying them back someday. "I want to help," I said carefully, "but I need to understand what's really happening here. Marcus, you said you got an eviction notice." Marcus shifted uncomfortably, adjusting Tyler on his shoulders. "Yeah, well, things got tight after the layoffs at the construction company. We got behind on rent and the landlord got nasty about it. So we figured it was time to make a change anyway." "How behind?" I asked. "Just a couple months," Cassidy said quickly, but I caught the look Marcus shot her. "The point is," Patricia interrupted, "we're all here now and we're family. Families stick together during difficult times. Your brother needs support right now and you're in a position to provide it." Harold pulled out a small notebook and started jotting down numbers. Let's see, your mortgage payment is probably around $2,000 a month on a place like this. Split 7 ways, that's less than $300 per person. Very reasonable. 7 ways, I echoed. Well, the children don't count, obviously, Patricia explained. But the 4 adults can certainly handle the expenses together. I watched Marcus set Tyler down and immediately begin exploring my kitchen cabinets. The little boy opened every drawer and door he could reach, leaving them hanging open in his wake. Emma had started crying in her stroller, and Cassidy was rummaging through what appeared to be a massive diaper bag, spreading supplies across my dining table. I need everyone to stop for a minute, I said, raising my voice slightly. This is my house. I just bought it. Today. I haven't even finished moving in my own belongings yet. Patricia's expression shifted to one of hurt disappointment. Burley, I'm surprised at you. Here we thought you'd be excited to finally have space for family gatherings and holidays. Remember how cramped it always was at our old house? But you still have your house, I pointed out. Harold and Patricia exchanged a look that made my stomach clench with dread. Actually, sweetheart, we've been meaning to talk to you about that, Patricia said gently. Your father's retirement isn't going as well as we'd hoped. The medical bills from his heart procedure last year really set us back. We're thinking of downsizing significantly. Possibly selling altogether, Harold added. The property taxes alone are killing us. I felt like I was drowning in information that kept getting worse. So, everyone needs a place to live. Temporarily, Marcus said quickly. Just until I get back on my feet, maybe find something in a different field since construction work is so unreliable. How temporarily? I asked. Another uncomfortable silence filled the room. Well, Cassidy said slowly, with the new baby coming, we're hoping to get settled somewhere stable for a while. New baby. The words came out as barely a whisper. Cassidy's hand moved protectively to her stomach, and I noticed for the first time that she was wearing loose-fitting clothes. I'm about 3 months along. We haven't announced it officially yet, but since we're all going to be living together, the room felt like it was tilting sideways. Not only had my entire family moved into my house without asking, but they were planning to stay indefinitely and add another baby to the mix. Tyler had found my refrigerator and was trying to climb onto a chair to reach something on top of it. Harold immediately went to help him, acting like he lived here already. Maybe we should discuss this more tomorrow, I suggested weakly, after everyone has had time to think. Nothing to think about, Patricia said firmly. We're family, and families take care of each other. Your brother made some mistakes, sure, but that's no reason to turn our backs on him. Besides, this arrangement will benefit everyone. You'll have help with the mortgage, and we'll all have a stable place to live. Marcus had found my pantry and was already making himself a sandwich. Plus, Tyler will love having his aunt around all the time. Won't you, buddy? Tyler cheered enthusiastically, still trying to climb my kitchen furniture. I realized with growing horror that my family wasn't just assuming they could move in. They'd already moved in. The discussion was over before it had even begun. The next morning, I woke up on my own couch. Somehow, overnight, I'd been displaced from my own bedroom. Patricia had gently but firmly suggested that since Marcus and Cassidy needed space for the baby's crib and Tyler's travel bed, it made more sense for me to use the living room temporarily. The smell of bacon filled the air, and I could hear my mother humming in the kitchen like she'd been cooking breakfast in my house for years. Harold was sitting at my dining table reading news on his tablet, completely at home in his bathrobe and slippers. Tyler was playing with blocks on the floor next to my coffee table, and Emma was babbling happily in a high chair that definitely hadn't been in my kitchen yesterday. Good morning, sleepyhead, Patricia called cheerfully when she saw me sitting up. I made everyone breakfast. Your refrigerator was practically empty, so I had Marcus run to the store early this morning. I rubbed my eyes, still trying to process how completely my life had changed in 12 hours. You went shopping. Marcus emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate loaded with eggs, bacon, and toast. Had to get some basics. Don't worry, I kept track of what I spent. We can settle up later. We'll need to set up a household budget anyway, Harold said without looking up from his tablet. Pool all the income and expenses together. Much more efficient than trying to split every little purchase. I stood up slowly, my back aching from the couch cushions. I think we need to have a serious conversation about this whole situation. Patricia's face immediately fell into an expression of wounded concern. Oh, honey, are you having second thoughts about helping your family? It's not about helping, I tried to explain. It's about the way this is all happening. Nobody asked me if I wanted roommates. Roommates? Patricia's voice carried a note of hurt that made me feel instantly guilty. Burley, we're not roommates, we're your family. Harold finally looked up from his tablet, fixing me with the same disappointed stare that had convinced me to quit piano lessons when I was 12, because the money was needed for Marcus's soccer equipment. Your mother and I have been talking, he said solemnly. We're concerned about the attitude you seem to be developing since you got this job and moved away. Success is wonderful, sweetheart, but it shouldn't make you forget where you came from. The familiar weight of childhood guilt settled over my shoulders like a heavy blanket. This was exactly how conversations had gone my entire life. Any time I'd wanted something different from what the family expected, I'd been made to feel selfish and ungrateful. I remember when you were Tyler's age. Patricia continued, her voice taking on the nostalgic tone she used when she wanted to make a point about family loyalty. You used to cry whenever we left you with a babysitter because you wanted to be with family. You said family was the most important thing in the world. Cassidy emerged from the bathroom looking pale and exhausted. Morning sickness is really hitting hard this time around, she explained weakly. Burley, would it be okay if I lay down on your couch for a few minutes? I looked at the couch where I'd just spent an uncomfortable night and felt a flash of irritation. That's where I've been sleeping. Oh, Cassidy's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, I just feel so awful. Marcus said you wouldn't mind if I rested there sometimes during the day. What Marcus meant, Patricia interjected smoothly, is that we'll all need to be flexible and considerate while we adjust to living together. Cassidy's carrying our grandchild Burley. Surely you can find somewhere else to relax during the day. I felt trapped between my natural desire to help someone who was feeling sick and my growing frustration at being treated like a guest in my own home. Of course, I heard myself saying, Cassidy, you can rest wherever you need to. See, Patricia beamed. I knew you'd be understanding. Family takes care of family. Harold returned to his tablet, pulling up what looked like a spreadsheet. I've been running some numbers on household expenses. Your salary is quite impressive, Burley. You should be able to cover the mortgage, utilities, and groceries without too much strain. My salary? I stared at him. How do you know what I make? Marcus mentioned the general range when he was telling us about your promotion, Harold said casually. Don't worry, we're not expecting you to carry the whole financial burden alone. Everyone will contribute what they can. What can you contribute? I asked Marcus directly. He shifted uncomfortably, bouncing Emma on his knee. Well, the unemployment benefits help, and I'm looking for work actively. Once I get something steady, I'll be pulling my weight financially. How long have you been unemployed? Just a few months, he said quickly. 6 months, Cassidy corrected quietly, then looked stricken like she'd said something wrong. The job market is tough right now. Patricia jumped in defensively. Marcus has been trying very hard to find work. It's not his fault that employers these days don't value loyalty and hard work like they used to. Harold nodded solemnly. Which is exactly why family support is so crucial during difficult times. Your brother needs encouragement and assistance, not judgment. I felt the familiar pattern closing around me. Every time I tried to ask practical questions, the conversation shifted to my character flaws and lack of family loyalty. It was the same emotional manipulation that had convinced me to give Marcus my college fund money when I was 16 because he needed a car more urgently than I needed education savings. I'm not judging anyone, I said carefully. I just want to understand what everyone's expectations are. Our expectations are simple, Patricia said with a sweet smile. We expect to be a family, to support each other and share resources like families do. For how long? As long as it takes, Harold said firmly. You don't put time limits on family support, Burley. Tyler had finished eating and was now exploring my living room with the thorough attention of a 3-year-old. He discovered my bookshelf and was systematically pulling books onto the floor while narrating an elaborate story about dragons and princesses. "Tyler, sweetie, be careful with Aunt Burley's books," Cassidy called weakly from where she was now lying on my couch. "It's fine," Marcus said. "Kids need to explore. Burley doesn't mind, do you—" I watched Tyler grab my signed first edition of a favorite novel and start flipping through it with sticky fingers. "Actually, could you maybe redirect him to some toys instead?" Patricia's expression shifted to one of subtle disappointment. "Of course, if you value your possessions more than your nephew's natural curiosity and development." The comment hit exactly where it was intended to. I immediately felt guilty for caring about material objects when Tyler was just being a normal child. "I didn't mean it like that," I backtracked. "We know you didn't, sweetheart," Patricia said gently. "It's just going to take some adjustment for everyone. Living with children requires patience and flexibility." Harold looked up from his spreadsheet again. "Speaking of adjustments, we'll need to discuss some practical matters. Your internet plan will probably need upgrading to handle more users, and the grocery budget will obviously need to increase significantly." "How significantly?" "Well, let's see." He consulted his notes. 7 people instead of 1 means roughly 7 times the food costs, plus diapers, baby formula when Cassidy stops nursing Emma children's snacks and supplies. I'd estimate around $600 to $800 per month, just for groceries. My current grocery budget was about $150 per month. The number he'd just quoted represented more than half my take-home pay. "That seems like a lot," I said weakly. "Children are expensive," Patricia agreed sympathetically. "But they're also blessings, and family is more important than money." Marcus stood up to chase after Tyler, who had moved on to investigating my entertainment center. "Don't worry, Burley. Once I get working again, I'll help with all the expenses. This is just temporary." "How temporary?" I asked again. "Just until we get back on our feet," Cassidy said from the couch. "Maybe a year or so. Definitely before the new baby gets too big." A year. The word hung in the air like a physical weight. I'd been thinking in terms of a few weeks, maybe a month, at the absolute longest. "A year's a long time," I said carefully. "Time flies when you're surrounded by family," Patricia said warmly. "You'll see. This is going to be wonderful for everyone." I looked around my living room, which had been transformed overnight into what looked like a daycare center mixed with a refugee camp. Toys, blankets, and baby supplies covered every surface. My carefully chosen decor had disappeared under the practical necessities of housing 7 people in a space designed for 1. For the first time since buying my house, I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. I woke up the next morning to the sound of Tyler jumping on my bed and Emma's crying echoing through the hallway. Somehow, overnight, the sleeping arrangements had shifted again. Harold explained that Patricia's back had been bothering her from the couch, so they'd moved into my bedroom while I was at work yesterday. I was now permanently relocated to the living room sofa. "Just until we figure out a better long-term arrangement," Patricia assured me, as she bustled around the kitchen making breakfast for everyone. She'd completely taken over my morning routine, cooking elaborate meals that used up groceries faster than I could comprehend. Marcus emerged from the shower singing loudly, clearly comfortable in his new living situation. He'd found my expensive shampoo and was apparently using it liberally based on the amount left in the bottle. "Morning, sis," he called cheerfully. "Hope you don't mind, but I invited Danny over tonight for dinner. Figured it was time to show off the new family setup." "Danny?" I asked, still groggy from another uncomfortable night on the couch. "My buddy from work," Marcus explained. "Well, my buddy from when I had work. He's been letting me store some stuff at his place, but now I can finally bring it all over here." The word "here" hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't storing things at my house temporarily. He was moving his belongings here permanently. Harold looked up from where he was sitting at my dining table with a calculator and a stack of papers spread in front of him. "I've been working on our household budget," he announced. The good news is that your salary can definitely cover our basic expenses if we're careful about unnecessary spending." He slid a detailed spreadsheet across the table toward me. I stared at numbers that showed my entire paycheck being distributed among mortgage, utilities, groceries, and family expenses, with about $50 left over for what he'd labeled Burley's personal discretionary spending. "What about my gym membership?" I asked weakly. "Luxury expense," Harold said dismissively. "You can exercise at home now that you have family around to motivate you." "And my student loan payments. We'll need to look into deferment options," he said. "Family housing takes priority over old debts." Patricia brought me a plate of eggs and bacon that I hadn't asked for, setting it down with a maternal smile. "Don't worry about all the financial details, sweetheart. Your father has always been good with numbers. He'll make sure everything works out fairly for everyone." Cassidy appeared in the hallway wearing one of my bathrobes, her hair wet from the shower. "Burley, I hope you don't mind, but I borrowed some of your shampoo and conditioner. The pregnancy is making my hair so dry and brittle." I stared at my bathrobe, which I'd been looking forward to wearing after my own shower. "That's fine," I heard myself saying. "You're so generous," Cassidy said warmly. "Marcus said you wouldn't mind sharing personal items since we're all family now." Tyler came running into the kitchen carrying one of my decorative vases, pretending it was a rocket ship. Patricia laughed indulgently while I watched my grandmother's antique crystal being waved around by a 3-year-old. "Tyler, maybe we should find you some toys to play with instead," I suggested gently. "This is more fun than toys," Tyler declared, making explosive sound effects as he crashed the vase into an imaginary planet. "Children need to use their imagination," Marcus said proudly. "He's really creative for his age." "But that's a family heirloom," I explained. "It belonged to my grandmother." Patricia's expression shifted to one of gentle disappointment. "Of course, if material possessions mean more to you than your nephew's happiness and development, we can find something else for him to play with." The familiar guilt washed over me again. How could I prioritize an object over a child's joy? What kind of person worried about antiques when family was involved? "It's okay," I said quickly. "Tyler can play with whatever he wants." "See," Patricia beamed, "I knew you'd remember what's really important." Harold returned to his financial planning with renewed enthusiasm. "Now about the household contribution structure. I'm thinking we set up automatic transfers from your account to cover all the major expenses. Then everyone contributes what they can for extras." "What can everyone else contribute?" I asked. "Well," Harold consulted his notes. "Marcus will contribute his unemployment benefits, which should cover about $300 per month toward groceries. And the rest of you—" An uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. "Your mother and I are on fixed incomes," Harold said carefully. "Social Security doesn't leave much room for additional expenses." "I'm pregnant and taking care of 2 small children," Cassidy added defensively. "I can't exactly go get a job right now." I looked around at my family, slowly realizing that I was expected to financially support 7 people on my single income. "This seems unsustainable," I said quietly. Marcus stopped making his sandwich and fixed me with a hurt expression. "Burley, I thought you wanted to help family. Are you saying you'd rather see your brother and his children homeless than share some of your success?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" Patricia's voice carried a note of wounded confusion. "Because it sounds like you're complaining about helping the people who love you most." My phone rang, interrupting the increasingly tense conversation. The caller ID showed my neighbor Janet's name. "Hello. Burley, honey, I hope you don't mind me calling, but I wanted to check on you. There's been a lot of activity at your house the past couple days, and I just wanted to make sure everything was okay." I walked toward the living room for privacy, but Harold followed, clearly curious about the conversation. "Everything's fine, Janet. My family is staying with me for a while." "Oh, how lovely," Janet said, though her tone suggested she found the situation less lovely than her words indicated. "It's just that there was quite a bit of noise last night, and my husband mentioned seeing several cars parked in your driveway pretty late." I looked out the window and realized that Marcus's car, Harold's truck, and Cassidy's small sedan were all crowded into my driveway, overflowing onto the street. "I'm sorry about the noise," I said. "We'll try to keep it down." "Of course, dear, and I don't want to pry, but the gentleman who was outside smoking around midnight was talking quite loudly on his phone. Something about finally having a permanent address for his benefits paperwork." My stomach clenched. Marcus had been outside conducting business calls about establishing residency at my address. "I'll talk to everyone about keeping conversations private," I said weakly. After I hung up, Harold was studying me with interest. "Neighbor problems already. Just some concerns about noise levels." "We'll need to be considerate," Patricia agreed, "though I hope the neighbors understand that families sometimes require more space and activity than single people." Marcus returned from the kitchen with a triumphant expression. "Great news, I got through to the unemployment office and I've officially changed my address to here for all my benefits. Should make everything much easier." "You changed your address?" I stared at him. "Well, yeah, I live here now. Made sense to update all my paperwork." Harold nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking. We should all probably update our addresses for official purposes. Driver's licenses, voter registration, that sort of thing." The room felt like it was spinning slightly. My family wasn't just staying with me temporarily, they were establishing legal residency at my address. "Did anyone think to ask me about this?" I said quietly. "Ask you about what?" Patricia looked genuinely confused. "About using my address for official business." "Sweetheart, this is where we live now," Patricia explained patiently. "Of course we need to use this address for important paperwork." Tyler chose that moment to trip over one of Emma's toys, sending my grandmother's vase flying. It hit the hardwood floor with a crystalline crash, shattering into dozens of pieces. The silence that followed felt deafening. "Oops," Tyler said in a small voice. "Accidents happen," Marcus said quickly, swooping down to pick up Tyler before he could step on the broken glass. "Kids break things sometimes. That's just part of life." I stared at the shattered remains of something that had been in my family for 3 generations, now reduced to sparkling fragments on my living room floor. "I told you this would happen," I whispered. "And that's exactly the kind of attitude we need to work on," Patricia said gently. "Objects can be replaced, Burley. Children cannot. What matters is that Tyler wasn't hurt." Harold was already getting the broom, taking charge of the cleanup like he owned the house. No point crying over accidents. These things happen in active households. I watched him sweep up pieces of my grandmother's vase while my family continued their morning routines as if nothing significant had occurred. The message was clear. My concerns and attachments meant nothing compared to their comfort and convenience. As Marcus headed toward the door to meet his friend Danny and collect more of his belongings, he called over his shoulder, "Oh, and Burley, Danny's bringing his girlfriend Sierra tonight too. Hope you don't mind a few extra people for dinner." The door closed behind him, leaving me standing among the fragments of crystal and the growing realization that my life had been completely taken over by people who seemed to believe they had every right to do so. The sound of a large truck backing into my driveway woke me from the restless sleep I'd managed to get on the couch. Through the window, I could see Marcus directing a friend in a pickup truck as they maneuvered around the cars already crowding my small front yard. "Danny's here," Tyler announced excitedly, pressing his face against the glass. "And he brought a big truck." Patricia emerged from my bedroom wearing my bathrobe and smiled at the scene outside. How wonderful that Marcus has such helpful friends. Family friends become our friends too. I watched with growing dread as Danny hopped out of the truck, followed by a young woman with bright pink hair, who must have been Sierra. But it was the truck bed that made my stomach drop completely. It was loaded with furniture boxes and what appeared to be an entire household worth of belongings. "I thought Marcus said he just had a few things stored at Danny's place," I said weakly. Harold looked up from his morning coffee completely unconcerned. Young people always underestimate how much stuff they actually have. Better to get it all moved at once than make multiple trips. Marcus burst through my front door with his arms spread wide in a triumphant gesture. Surprise, I managed to get everything together sooner than expected. Danny was free today, so we figured we'd just knock out the whole move. The whole move? I echoed. Yeah, all my stuff that's been scattered around different places since we lost the apartment. Now I can finally get properly settled in. Sierra bounded into my living room with the enthusiasm of someone who found the whole situation delightful. This is so exciting. Marcus has told us so much about your beautiful new home. It's wonderful that you're able to help family like this. Danny appeared in my doorway carrying a large box labeled Marcus, kitchen stuff. Where do you want this? He asked Marcus, not me. Just set it in the kitchen for now, Marcus replied. We'll sort through everything later. I watched strangers carry my brother's belongings into my house while my family acted like this was a perfectly normal occurrence. Harold had already gone outside to help direct the unloading process, and Patricia was bustling around making coffee for everyone. How much stuff is there? I asked Marcus quietly. Not too much, he said evasively. Just the essentials we need to get back on our feet. Through the window, I could see Danny and Harold carrying what appeared to be a full-sized refrigerator toward my front door. A refrigerator. I stared at Marcus. I already have a refrigerator. That old thing, Marcus laughed. Mine's practically new. We'll just put yours in the garage for backup. My refrigerator is less than a year old. Exactly why it'll keep perfectly fine in the garage, he said, as if this explanation made perfect sense. Sierra settled onto my couch next to Cassidy, immediately launching into animated conversation about pregnancy and babies. I caught fragments about morning sickness remedies and the best brands of diapers, apparently assuming she'd be a regular presence in my house. Tyler was following the moving process with intense interest, asking Danny questions about truck engines and helping carry lighter items that he probably shouldn't have been handling. Is this going to take all day? I asked Marcus as more boxes appeared. Probably just a few hours, he said cheerfully. Sierra brought sandwiches for everyone, so we won't even need to stop for lunch. The casual mention of meal planning for a group of people in my house highlighted how completely my space had been taken over. Decisions were being made about my home, my schedule, and my resources without any input from me whatsoever. Harold and Danny maneuvered the refrigerator through my front door, immediately beginning to disconnect my appliance to make room for Marcus's. Wait, I said, panic rising in my voice. You can't just replace my refrigerator. We're not replacing it, Harold said patiently. We're upgrading it. Marcus's model has more freezer space, which we'll need for the larger household. But this is my house. Patricia paused in her coffee preparation to give me a concerned look. Of course it's your house, sweetheart. That's exactly why you have the power to make generous decisions that help your family. Sierra looked up from her conversation with Cassidy, her expression shifting to one of awkward confusion. Oh, is there some kind of problem? Marcus said everyone was excited about the living situation. The weight of public expectations settled over me like a heavy blanket. How could I explain that my family had moved into my house without permission, while standing in front of their friends who clearly believed I was a generous person, helping family in need? No problem, I heard myself saying, just adjusting to having more people around. It's such a beautiful thing when families support each other, Sierra said warmly. My family could never coordinate something like this. You're all so lucky to be close. Danny appeared carrying another box, this one labeled Marcus, Important Papers. Where's the best place for documents and stuff? He asked Marcus. Probably Burley's office, Marcus replied. She's got file cabinets and everything set up already. My office. I followed them down the hallway, watching Danny set the box down next to my desk. Just temporarily, Marcus assured me, until I get my own filing system organized. I stared at the box sitting in my carefully organized workspace, representing yet another intrusion into my personal space. My home office had been my sanctuary, the one place where I could work quietly and maintain some sense of order. How much more is there? I asked, watching Danny head back outside. Just the furniture and a few more boxes, Marcus said. Oh, and my tools. I kept all my construction equipment because I'll need it when I start working again. Through the window, I could see Harold and Danny beginning to unload what appeared to be a complete workshop worth of power tools, toolboxes, and construction materials. Where exactly are you planning to store construction tools? The garage, obviously, Marcus said. That's where tools belong. I use the garage for my car. Well, you can park in the driveway, he said reasonably. Tools need to be protected from the weather. I realized that my car was going to be permanently displaced to make room for Marcus's belongings, just like I'd been displaced from my own bedroom. Patricia appeared with coffee for Danny and Sierra, playing the perfect hostess in my living room. It's so wonderful to see young people helping each other, she told Danny. Marcus is lucky to have such good friends. Marcus is great, Danny replied, always willing to help out when someone needs it. Like when I needed a place to crash for a couple weeks last year. You stayed with Marcus, I asked. Yeah, him and Cassidy were super cool about it. Family helps family, you know. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus had apparently housed his friend when Danny needed help, but had never asked my permission before moving his entire family into my home. Sierra was taking photos of Tyler and Emma playing together, apparently documenting the happy family scene for social media. This is going on Instagram, she announced. Everyone's going to love seeing Marcus finally settled in a beautiful place. My stomach clenched as I realized that my personal living situation was about to be broadcast to Marcus's entire social network. People would see my house, my family, and assume I'd willingly chosen this arrangement. Cassidy looked up from playing with Emma, her expression suddenly concerned. Burley, you look a little pale. Are you feeling okay? All eyes turned to me, and I felt the familiar pressure to minimize my discomfort for the sake of family harmony. I'm fine, I said automatically, just tired. You should get more rest, Patricia suggested kindly. It takes time to adjust to a busier household. Harold and Danny had moved on to unloading what appeared to be an entire bedroom set, dresser nightstand and a queen-sized bed frame. Where is that going? I asked weakly. The master bedroom, Marcus replied. Our old bed was pretty beat up. This one's much nicer. But my bed is already in the master bedroom. We'll move yours to the guest room, he said, as if this was a perfectly reasonable solution to a problem I didn't know existed. I watched my furniture being rearranged by people who had been in my house for less than 3 days, making permanent changes to accommodate their preferences and belongings. Sierra took another photo, this one of the entire group working together to move furniture. This is so heartwarming, she said. Marcus, your sister is amazing for doing this. The word doing implied choice and intention that I'd never actually exercised. But standing there, surrounded by witnesses, I couldn't figure out how to explain that none of this had been my decision without sounding like a terrible person. Family is everything, Patricia said warmly, putting her arm around my shoulders for Sierra's next photo. We're so proud of Burley for opening her home to everyone. The camera flashed, capturing what would look like a moment of family unity and generosity. But all I could think about was how completely my life had been taken over by people who seemed to believe they had every right to do so. As Danny and Harold carried my bed frame out of what used to be my bedroom, I realized that I no longer had any private space left in my own house. That evening, after Danny and Sierra finally left, Harold spread a collection of papers across my dining table with the methodical precision of someone conducting a business meeting. Bank statements, bills, and calculators covered the surface, while Patricia made tea for everyone like this was a perfectly normal family gathering. Now that everyone's settled in properly, Harold announced, it's time to establish our household financial structure. I sat down reluctantly, still reeling from watching my entire home be reorganized without my consent. Marcus was on the floor assembling Tyler's new toy box in what used to be my living room, while Cassidy fed Emma in the kitchen. Harold pulled out a yellow legal pad covered in his neat handwriting. I've calculated all our monthly expenses, and the good news is that everything is manageable with proper planning. He slid the first sheet toward me. The numbers showed my mortgage payment, utilities, insurance, and a grocery budget that made my eyes widen. At the bottom, in red ink, was my monthly salary with deductions for taxes and benefits. As you can see, Harold continued, your take-home pay of $4,200 per month covers all our basic needs with room for modest savings. Our basic needs. I stared at the breakdown. This budget assumes I'm supporting 7 people. Well, yes, Harold said patiently. That's the reality of our situation. Patricia set a cup of tea in front of me with a gentle smile. It's wonderful that you're in a position to help, sweetheart. Not everyone is blessed with such a good income. The phone rang before I could respond. Patricia answered it cheerfully, and I heard her say, "Oh, Ruth, how lovely to hear from you." Ruth was my mother's oldest friend, someone who'd known me since childhood. Patricia immediately put the call on speaker, settling back into her chair with obvious pleasure. I just had to call after seeing Sierra's photos on Facebook. Ruth's voice filled the room. Patricia, you must be so proud of Burley for opening her home to the whole family. My stomach dropped. The photos were already circulating on social media. We absolutely are. Patricia beamed. Burley has such a generous heart. She insisted that we all move in together so we could support Marcus during this difficult time. Insisted. I stared at my mother, but she was focused entirely on her conversation with Ruth. It's such a beautiful thing when families stick together, Ruth continued. In my day, this is exactly how families handled hard times. Multiple generations living together, sharing resources, supporting each other. Harold nodded approvingly while making notes on his legal pad. Ruth's absolutely right. This arrangement benefits everyone involved. And Marcus seems so much more hopeful in the photos, Ruth added. Having family support must mean everything to him right now. It does, Patricia agreed warmly. He's already talking about looking into trade school programs now that he has stable housing. This was the first I'd heard about trade school, but Harold was already making notes about educational expenses in his budget calculations. Well, you give that wonderful daughter of yours my love, Ruth said. She's doing something truly special. After Patricia hung up, the silence in the room felt heavy with expectation. That was nice of Ruth to call, I said carefully. She's not the only one, Patricia replied. I've gotten calls from your Aunt Linda and Cousin Jennifer, too. Everyone's so impressed with your generosity. Harold returned to his financial planning with renewed focus. Now about monthly contributions from everyone else. Marcus will provide $300 from his unemployment benefits toward groceries and household supplies. What about everyone else? I asked. Harold consulted his notes. Your mother and I are on fixed incomes, as I mentioned. Social Security provides exactly enough to cover our personal necessities and medications. And Cassidy, I'm pregnant, Cassidy called from the kitchen, her voice carrying a note of exhaustion. And I'm taking care of 2 small children full-time. That's a valuable contribution to the household. Marcus looked up from the toy assembly project. Plus, someone needs to be here during the day to keep an eye on things. Home security, you know. I realized that my family had reorganized their entire explanation of the living situation. Instead of admitting they needed financial help, they were presenting themselves as providing valuable services to me. Harold pulled out another sheet of paper. I've also been looking into some additional financial opportunities for our household. What kind of opportunities? Well, for instance, you can claim Marcus's children as dependents on your tax return since they're living in your house now. That should provide substantial tax benefits. Is that legal? Perfectly legal, Harold assured me. The IRS allows taxpayers to claim dependents who live in their household for more than half the year. Marcus had moved on to setting up what appeared to be a gaming system connected to my television. Plus, Cassidy's been looking into state assistance programs. Turns out there are benefits available for families with young children. What kind of benefits? Cassidy appeared from the kitchen carrying Emma. Childcare assistance, food stamps, medical coverage, things that help families get back on their feet. Using my address and income information. Well, we live here now, Cassidy said reasonably, and the programs are based on household composition and income. I felt a growing sense of panic as I realized my family was systematically involving me in government benefit applications and tax strategies without my knowledge or consent. Harold pulled out yet another document. There's also the matter of your mortgage interest deduction. With a larger household, we might qualify for additional homeowner benefits. The household, he clarified, since everyone contributes to the mortgage through their various forms of support. I looked around at my family, slowly understanding that they'd constructed an elaborate financial justification for their presence in my home. Every person had been assigned a role that made them essential to the household operation. What if I wanted to live alone again? I asked quietly. The room fell silent except for the sound of Tyler playing with his toys and Emma babbling softly. Patricia's expression shifted to one of hurt confusion. Why would you want that, sweetheart? We're finally all together as a family. But what if I did? Harold set down his pen and fixed me with a serious look. Burley, you've made commitments now. Marcus has established residency here for his benefits and parole requirements. The children are enrolled in local programs. Your mother and I have begun the process of selling our house. You're selling your house? The words came out as barely a whisper. The property taxes alone were becoming unmanageable, Patricia explained. Plus the maintenance costs on such an old place. It makes much more sense for us to contribute to this household instead. Marcus looked up from connecting cables to my television. Besides, breaking up the family now would be really hard on Tyler and Emma. They love it here. As if on cue, Tyler ran over and threw his arms around my legs. Aunt Burley, will you read me a bedtime story tonight? Looking down at his hopeful face, I felt the familiar trap of guilt and obligation closing around me. How could I disrupt his sense of security and happiness? Of course, I heard myself saying. Patricia smiled warmly. See, this is exactly what family is supposed to feel like. Harold returned to his calculations with satisfaction. Now, about the monthly budget implementation. I suggest we set up automatic transfers from your checking account to cover all the major expenses, then track additional costs through a shared household ledger. I stared at the papers spread across my dining table, each one representing another way my family had woven themselves into my financial and legal life. What had started as a temporary housing arrangement was rapidly becoming a permanent entanglement that would be difficult to unravel. Marcus had successfully connected his gaming system and was testing it with Tyler's enthusiastic assistance. The sound of video game music filled my living room, adding to the sense that my quiet, orderly life had been completely transformed. This is going to be great, Marcus announced. Tyler's going to love having all these games to play. I watched my nephew's excited face and realized that even if I wanted to reclaim my space and independence, I was now responsible for the happiness and stability of people who had built their entire lives around my resources. The trap had been expertly laid and I was completely caught. I woke up the next morning to my phone ringing at 7:30. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something about the early hour made me answer anyway. Is this Burley Morrison? A professional male voice asked. Yes, this is Burley. This is Officer Thompson with the County Parole Office. I'm calling to verify the residence of Marcus Morrison for his monthly compliance check. My blood ran cold. I sat up on the couch looking around at my living room, which still showed signs of yesterday's furniture rearrangement. I'm sorry, what kind of check? Standard procedure, Officer Thompson explained. Marcus is required to maintain verified housing as part of his parole conditions. He's listed your address as his permanent residence, so I need to confirm he actually lives there. The phone was snatched from my hand before I could respond. Patricia had appeared beside the couch and was already speaking into the receiver. Good morning, Officer Thompson. This is Patricia Morrison, Marcus's mother. Yes, Marcus lives here permanently with his family. This is his stable housing arrangement. I tried to take the phone back, but Patricia moved away, continuing her conversation with confident authority. He's been living here since his release, and it's working out wonderfully. Very stable environment for him and his children. After she hung up, I stared at her in shock. Marcus is on parole. Was on parole, Patricia corrected. He's almost finished with his supervision period. Just a few more months of check-ins. Harold emerged from my bedroom, apparently having overheard the conversation. Nothing serious, he assured me. Just some trouble from his younger days. Everyone makes mistakes. Marcus appeared from the bathroom, clearly having heard his name mentioned. What's going on? Officer Thompson called to verify your address, Patricia explained. I told him everything was fine. Great, Marcus said with obvious relief. Thanks for handling that, Mom. I felt like I was drowning in information that kept getting worse. What exactly was Marcus on parole for? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Just some financial difficulties, Marcus said vaguely. Nothing violent or anything like that. What kind of financial difficulties? Harold stepped in with the tone he used when he wanted to end uncomfortable conversations. The details aren't important, Burley. What matters is that Marcus has learned from his mistakes and is committed to making better choices. The details are important if I'm housing someone on parole without knowing about it, I said, my voice rising slightly. Cassidy emerged from the kitchen with Emma looking distressed by the tension in the room. Please don't argue in front of the children, she pleaded. Tyler ran into the room carrying a juice box, apparently oblivious to the adult conversation happening around him. Marcus, I said firmly, I need to know what you were convicted of. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Credit card fraud, he said finally, and some check kiting issues, but that was years ago. Theft. Financial mistakes, Patricia corrected sharply, and he's paid his debt to society. Harold pulled out his wallet and extracted several cards. Speaking of financial matters, I've been meaning to show you these. I updated my driver's license and voter registration to this address yesterday. I stared at the official documents showing my address as Harold's permanent residence. You changed your legal address. Well, I live here now, he said reasonably. It's important to have accurate documentation. Patricia nodded approvingly. I'm planning to update mine today too, and we should probably add Marcus and Cassidy to your homeowner's insurance policy, since they're permanent residents. The room felt like it was tilting sideways. My family wasn't just staying with me temporarily, they were establishing legal residency and involving me in insurance policies without my consent. What about your old house? I asked weakly. I told you we're selling it, Patricia replied. In fact, the realtor is coming by this afternoon to take listing photos. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized as my mortgage company. Hello. Ms. Morrison, this is Janet from Premier Mortgage. I'm calling because we've received some inquiries about adding additional residents to your homeowner's insurance policy. I wanted to verify these changes with you directly. I looked around at my family, all of whom were watching the conversation with interest. What kind of changes? Adding 4 adult residents and 2 minor children to your policy coverage. The request came through your insurance agent this morning. I didn't request any changes. Oh, Janet sounded confused. The caller identified himself as Harold Morrison and said he was your father calling on your behalf. Harold had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, but not apologetic. Let me call you back, I told Janet, hanging up quickly. Harold, you can't make changes to my insurance policy. I was just trying to make sure everyone was properly covered, he protested. What if something happened and we weren't protected? That's not the point. You can't make financial decisions about my property without asking me. Marcus looked up from where he was helping Tyler open his juice box. Burley, you're being kind of dramatic about this stuff. We're family. We look out for each other. Looking out for each other doesn't mean changing legal documents without permission. Patricia sat down next to me on the couch with the patient expression she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. Sweetheart, I think you're getting overwhelmed by all the practical details of having a larger household. These are just administrative tasks that need to be handled. The mail truck pulled up outside and Marcus immediately went to check for deliveries. He returned with a stack of letters, sorting through them casually. Looks like my unemployment office sent some paperwork here, he announced. And Cassidy's got something from the WIC program. WIC program? Cassidy looked up from feeding Emma. Women, Infants, and Children Nutrition Assistance. It helps with grocery costs for the babies. Using this address, well, this is where we live now, she said defensively, and where the children live. I realized that government agencies were now sending official mail to my address for multiple family members, further establishing their legal residency. Marcus was still sorting mail. Oh, and there's something here about school enrollment for Tyler. School enrollment. The local elementary school, Marcus explained. Tyler needs to be registered for next year and they require proof of address. You're enrolling him in school using my address. Patricia nodded approvingly. Children need educational stability, Burley. It would be cruel to keep moving Tyler around between different schools. I felt like I was being buried under an avalanche of legal and financial obligations that I'd never agreed to take on. What happens if I want everyone to move out? I asked quietly. The room fell silent again, but this time the quality of the silence felt different, more tense. Harold set down the mail and fixed me with a serious look. Burley, that would create some significant legal complications now. What kind of complications? Well, Marcus's parole requires stable housing. Moving him could violate his supervision agreement. And Tyler's school enrollment creates educational custody issues, Patricia added. Children can't just be uprooted arbitrarily. Cassidy's eyes filled with tears. Plus, I'm pregnant and high risk. My doctor specifically said I need to avoid stress and major changes. I looked around at my family, slowly realizing that every decision they'd made over the past few days had created legal and practical barriers to their removal from my home. Marcus returned to playing with Tyler, but I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Besides, Harold said, returning to his morning paperwork, breaking up this household arrangement would be financially devastating for everyone involved. How so? Well, I've already put our old house on the market based on the assumption that we'd be living here permanently, and Marcus has commitments tied to this address now. Patricia patted my hand gently. The point is, sweetheart, we're all committed to making this work. It's not just about housing anymore, it's about family. As I sat surrounded by mail addressed to other people and legal documents establishing their residency in my home, I realized that what had started as an unwelcome surprise visit had become a carefully orchestrated takeover of my entire life. And getting out of it was going to be far more complicated than I'd ever imagined. The doorbell rang that afternoon while I was attempting to work from my home office, which had become increasingly difficult with Tyler's toys scattered across the floor and Marcus's boxes stacked against my file cabinets. I could hear Patricia answering the door, followed by voices that didn't sound friendly. "We're looking for Marcus Morrison," a gruff male voice said. "I'm sorry, who's asking?" Patricia replied, her tone shifting from welcoming to cautious. I got up from my desk and walked toward the front of the house, arriving just as two men pushed past my mother into my living room. They were both large, intimidating figures dressed in dark clothing, and they clearly weren't here for a social visit. "Marcus around?" the taller man asked, scanning the room like he owned the place. Marcus appeared from the kitchen, his face immediately draining of color when he saw the visitors. "Rico, Tony, what are you guys doing here?" "What do you think we're doing here?" Rico replied, his voice carrying an unmistakable threat. "You've been dodging our calls." Tyler, who had been playing on the floor, looked up with wide eyes at the scary strangers in his living room. Cassidy immediately scooped him up and backed toward the hallway with Emma in her other arm. "Can we talk about this outside?" Marcus asked nervously. "We can talk about it right here," Tony said, settling himself onto my couch without invitation. "Nice place you got here. Much better than that dump you were living in before." Harold had emerged from the bedroom and was standing uncertainly in the hallway, clearly recognizing that something dangerous was happening, but unsure how to handle it. "How much?" Rico asked Marcus bluntly. "How much what?" Marcus tried to play dumb, but his voice was shaking. "Don't be stupid," Rico said. "How much do you owe us?" An uncomfortable silence filled my living room, while my family exchanged glances that suggested this conversation had been expected. "About 8,000, Marcus admitted finally. The number hit me like a physical blow. $8,000 in debt to people who looked like they collected payments through violence. Plus interest, Tony added helpfully. Call it $10,000 now. $10,000, Patricia gasped. Rico looked around my living room appraisingly. Nice TV, good furniture. Looks like your family's doing pretty well for themselves. This isn't Marcus's house, I said quickly, stepping forward. This is my home. Both men turned their attention to me for the first time, and I immediately regretted speaking up. You're the sister, Rico said, not asking. Marcus told us all about his generous family member with the good job in the new house. Marcus has been telling people about me. Had to explain how he was going to pay us back, Tony explained. Said his sister would help out since she's family and all. I stared at Marcus in horror. You told them I would pay your gambling debts. I didn't exactly say that, Marcus protested weakly. You said your sister had money and would take care of family obligations, Rico corrected. Those were your exact words. Harold stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. Gentlemen, I think there's been some misunderstanding here. No misunderstanding, Rico said firmly. Marcus owes us money. He said his family would cover it. Here we are. Cassidy had retreated to the far end of the hallway with both children, but Tyler was still staring at the strangers with frightened curiosity. Why are the scary men mad at Daddy? Tyler asked loudly. Shh, baby, Cassidy whispered, but her voice was audible to everyone. Tony smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Smart kid. Daddy made some bad choices and now he needs to fix them. I don't have $10,000, I said desperately. But you've got this nice house, Rico pointed out. Good credit, probably. Ways to get money when family needs help. The implication was clear and terrifying. They expected me to find a way to pay Marcus's debts, and they were prepared to pressure me until I did. This is getting out of hand, Harold said, but his voice lacked any real authority. What's getting out of hand, Rico replied, is Marcus thinking he can just disappear and avoid his responsibilities. I wasn't disappearing, Marcus protested. I just moved in with family like I told you I would. And told us your family would help with the money situation, Tony added. So here we are talking to family. Patricia had been silent during most of this exchange, but now she stepped forward with the expression she used when she was about to blame someone for family problems. Burley, surely you can help your brother out of this difficulty, she said. Family sticks together during emergencies. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother was suggesting I pay $10,000 to dangerous criminals because my brother had gambling problems. I don't have that kind of money just lying around, I said. Home equity loan, Harold suggested helpfully. You've got plenty of equity in this place. Rico nodded approvingly. Smart man, houses are good for getting cash when you need it. The conversation was spiraling into a nightmare where my own family was collaborating with criminals to pressure me into taking on massive debt. I need everyone to leave, I said, my voice shaking. This is my house and I want everyone out. Can't do that, Tony said calmly. Not until we work out this payment situation. You can't force me to pay someone else's debts. We're not forcing anything, Rico said reasonably. We're just having a family discussion about Marcus's obligations. Tyler started crying, overwhelmed by the tension and fear in the room. Cassidy tried to comfort him while backing further down the hallway. Look what you're doing to the children, Patricia said to me accusingly. They're terrified because you're being difficult about helping family. The blame was breathtaking. Somehow the presence of dangerous criminals in my living room was my fault because I wasn't immediately agreeing to pay my brother's gambling debts. Marcus looked around desperately. Maybe we could work out some kind of payment plan, small amounts over time. Time costs extra, Rico said, and we don't like waiting around for our money. How about this? Tony suggested, pulling out a small notebook. We'll give you 1 week to figure out the money situation. After that, we'll need to explore other options. What other options? I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Let's just say we're very motivated to collect what we're owed, Rico replied, and we know where Marcus lives now. The threat was unmistakable. They knew my address and they were prepared to return with increased pressure if the debt wasn't paid. 1 week, Tony confirmed, standing up from my couch. We'll be back next Friday to check on your progress. As they moved toward my front door, Rico turned back to Marcus. Smart move getting your family involved. Makes everything much easier for everyone. After they left, the silence in my living room felt deafening. Tyler was still crying. Cassidy was trying to calm both children, and my parents were looking at me with expectant expressions like I was supposed to solve this problem immediately. Well, Harold said finally, I guess we need to look into that home equity loan sooner than expected. I stared at my family, slowly realizing that they fully expected me to borrow money against my house to pay off Marcus's gambling debts to dangerous criminals. And somehow this was being presented as just another family obligation I was supposed to handle without complaint. The next morning, I woke up to my neighbor Janet standing on my front porch at 7 a.m, looking more serious than I'd ever seen her. Through the window, I could see she was holding some kind of official-looking document. Burley, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you this early, but we need to talk, Janet said when I opened the door. Behind her, I noticed several other neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, apparently waiting to see how this conversation would go. What's wrong? I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Janet held up the document, which turned out to be a letter on HOA letterhead. The Homeowners Association received multiple complaints yesterday about the incident at your house. Incident. The men who were shouting threats in your driveway, she explained gently. Several neighbors heard them talking about money and making remarks about your property. My stomach dropped as I realized the entire neighborhood had witnessed Rico and Tony's visit. Ms. Crawford asked me to deliver this as the neighborhood welcoming committee chair, Janet continued. It's a formal violation notice. I took the letter with shaking hands. The official language cited disturbances of the peace, suspected criminal activity, overcrowding violations, and threats to community safety. Patricia appeared behind me in my bathrobe, immediately taking charge of the situation. Good morning, Janet, she said warmly. I'm Burley's mother, Patricia. I'm sure we can clear up any misunderstandings about yesterday. Janet looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Morrison, I don't think this is a misunderstanding. Several neighbors witnessed men making threats about debt collection and property damage. Family disagreements sometimes get heated, Patricia explained dismissively, but everything's been resolved now. The HOA doesn't consider debt collectors a family matter, Janet replied firmly, and we have particular concerns about the number of people currently residing at this address. Harold emerged from my bedroom, apparently having overheard the conversation. How many people live here isn't really the neighbor's business. Actually, it is, Janet said, consulting her copy of the HOA bylaws. Single-family residential properties are limited to immediate family members only. Extended family requires special approval. We're all immediate family, Patricia protested. 7 people in a 2-bedroom house exceeds occupancy guidelines regardless of family relationships, Janet explained. Plus, the parking situation is creating problems for other residents. I looked outside and realized that Marcus's car, Harold's truck, and Cassidy's sedan were indeed taking up most of the available street parking in front of my house and the 2 neighboring properties. We're working on solutions for all these issues, I said weakly. I hope so, Janet replied, because the HOA board is meeting tonight to discuss this situation. If the violations aren't resolved within 30 days, there could be fines or other enforcement actions. After Janet left, I sat at my dining table staring at the violation notice while my family went about their morning routines as if nothing had happened. My phone buzzed with a text message from my coworker, Linda. Saw the craziest video on Facebook. Isn't that your house? With growing dread, I opened Facebook and searched for my address. Sure enough, someone had posted a video taken from across the street showing Rico and Tony's visit to my house. The caption read, "Debt collectors or something worse. This is getting scary in our neighborhood." The video had already been shared dozens of times and had attracted comments ranging from concern to outright suspicion about what was happening at my house. Oh no, I whispered. Marcus looked over my shoulder at the phone screen. That's not good. Not good. I stared at him. This is a disaster. My entire professional reputation is going to be destroyed. Patricia waved dismissively. People love to gossip. It'll blow over in a few days. But my phone was already ringing with a call from my office. My boss, Mr. Anderson, was calling at 8 in the morning, which was never a good sign. Burley, I need you to come in early today. We've had some concerns brought to our attention. What kind of concerns? Let's discuss it when you get here, he said diplomatically, but his tone suggested the conversation wasn't going to be pleasant. Harold looked up from his morning coffee. Work problems already. The video of yesterday's incident is circulating on social media, I explained. My employer probably saw it. So what, Marcus said. It's not like you did anything wrong. Having criminals threaten people at my address creates liability issues for my company, I said, especially since I handle client accounts with security clearance requirements. Cassidy emerged from the bathroom looking pale and exhausted. Could everyone please keep it down? I'm having terrible morning sickness, and the stress isn't helping. See? Patricia said pointedly. This is exactly why we need to handle these situations calmly instead of getting dramatic about them. I stared at my mother, amazed by her ability to reframe everything as my fault. My phone buzzed again with another text, this one from my colleague James. Hey, is everything okay? Someone forwarded me a video that looks like it was taken at your house. Then another message from my friend Sarah. Burley, call me. I saw something online that has me worried about you. The realization hit me that my personal crisis was becoming public knowledge throughout my professional and social networks. I need to go to work and try to handle this, I said, standing up from the table. Don't let them make you feel bad about family obligations, Harold advised. Any decent employer should understand that families face challenges sometimes. Employers don't understand having criminal debt collectors show up at their employees' homes, I replied. Patricia's expression shifted to one of hurt disappointment. Those men weren't criminals, Burley. They were just business associates of Marcus trying to collect a legitimate debt. Legitimate debt from illegal gambling, I pointed out. Everyone makes mistakes, she said firmly. The important thing is that family supports each other through difficult times. As I got ready for work, I could hear Tyler playing in the living room, Emma crying in the kitchen, and Marcus talking loudly on his phone about job applications. The house that had been my peaceful sanctuary just a week ago was now a source of neighborhood complaints, social media controversy, and professional liability. When I came back through the living room, Patricia stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. Sweetheart, I know this feels overwhelming right now, but you'll see. Once we get through this rough patch, having family close by is going to be the most wonderful thing in your life. I looked at the HOA violation notice still sitting on my dining table, then at the Facebook video playing on my phone, and tried to imagine how any of this could possibly lead to wonderful outcomes. But as I headed out to my car, which was now parked on the street because my garage was full of Marcus's construction tools, all I could think about was how completely my life had been taken over by people who seemed genuinely surprised that there were consequences to their choices. And somehow I was expected to fix all the problems they'd created while being grateful for the opportunity to help family. The meeting with Mr. Anderson was every bit as uncomfortable as I'd anticipated. He sat behind his desk with a folder that I suspected contained information about my home situation, while Sarah from HR observed from a chair in the corner. Burley, you've been an excellent employee for 3 years, Mr. Anderson began, which is why we wanted to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention. What concerns? Sarah opened her own folder. We received a call yesterday from a client who mentioned seeing social media posts about criminal activity at your address. My heart sank. It wasn't criminal activity, it was a personal family matter. I understand, Mr. Anderson said diplomatically, but we have to consider how these situations might affect our business relationships. Sarah consulted her notes. The client specifically mentioned concerns about your security clearance status. Several of our contracts require employees with access to sensitive information to maintain certain personal conduct standards. I haven't done anything wrong, I protested. We're not saying you have, Mr. Anderson replied, but association with individuals who have criminal backgrounds can sometimes impact security clearance eligibility. Criminal backgrounds. Sarah turned her computer screen toward me, showing what appeared to be a background check report with Marcus's name at the top. Your brother's criminal record came up during a routine verification process, she explained. Credit card fraud and identity theft convictions can be particularly problematic for employees who handle financial accounts. I stared at the report, seeing Marcus's crimes laid out in official language. The scope was much more extensive than he'd admitted to me. I didn't know about most of this when he moved in, I said weakly. We understand these are family matters beyond your control, Mr. Anderson said, but we've had to remove you from the Meridian account pending further review. The Meridian account represented about 30% of my yearly income through commission and bonuses. Losing it would be a significant financial blow. For how long? That depends on how the situation resolves itself, Sarah replied carefully. After the meeting, I sat in my car in the company parking lot trying to process how quickly my professional life was unraveling. My phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. Burley, it's Officer Thompson from the parole office. I need to discuss something with you about Marcus Morrison's living situation. What about it? We've received reports about criminal associates visiting your address. Marcus is required to avoid contact with known criminals as part of his parole conditions. I didn't know they were criminals when they came to the house. I understand, but Marcus did. He should have contacted me immediately when they showed up. The conversation continued with Officer Thompson explaining that Marcus's parole could be revoked if criminal associates continued visiting my address. This would result in him being returned to prison, which would create custody issues for Tyler and Emma. What am I supposed to do? I asked. Marcus needs to demonstrate that he's taking steps to avoid further contact with these individuals, Officer Thompson explained, and you need to understand that continued criminal activity at your address could make you liable as well. After I hung up, I realized that my brother's legal troubles were now directly threatening my own freedom and legal standing. The drive home felt surreal. In less than a week, I'd gone from being a successful professional with a beautiful new home to someone whose career was in jeopardy and whose property was associated with criminal activity. When I walked into my house, I found Marcus setting up what appeared to be a home office in my former guest room, which had previously been designated as Cassidy and the children's space. What are you doing? I asked. Setting up a workspace? He replied cheerfully. I'm starting some freelance consulting work while I look for regular employment. What kind of consulting? Financial planning and investment advice, he said, seemingly oblivious to the irony. Turns out there's good money in helping people manage their resources better. I stared at him in disbelief. Marcus, you were convicted of financial fraud. That's exactly why I understand the pitfalls people need to avoid, he explained. Personal experience makes me uniquely qualified to help others. Patricia appeared from the kitchen with a pleased expression. Isn't it wonderful Marcus is finally using his talents productively? He can't run a financial consulting business from my house, I said. Why not? Harold asked, emerging from my bedroom with what looked like business cards. It's perfect. Professional address, quiet environment, family support. I took one of the business cards which listed Marcus's name, financial consultant, and my address as his business location. You made business cards using my address. Just temporary ones, Marcus said, until I get established and can afford office space. My phone rang again. This time it was my insurance agent. Burley, I need to clarify something about your homeowner's policy. We've received reports about business activities being conducted at your residence. What kind of reports? Someone called claiming they'd been solicited for financial services by a consultant operating out of your address. Residential policies don't typically cover commercial activities. After I hung up, I realized that Marcus's consulting business was creating additional insurance liability issues on top of everything else. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "you can't run a business from my house without my permission." "I'm not running a business," he protested. "I'm just doing some freelance work to contribute to household expenses." Harold nodded approvingly. "Finally taking initiative to help with the financial burden." "The financial burden that exists because you all moved in without asking," I pointed out. Patricia's expression shifted to one of familiar disappointment. "Burley, your brother, is trying to be responsible and contribute to the household. I would think you'd be pleased." Cassidy appeared from the bathroom, still looking pale from morning sickness. "What's all the arguing about now?" "Burley's upset that Marcus is trying to earn money," Patricia explained. "That's not what I'm upset about," I protested. "Then what?" Cassidy asked wearily. I looked around at my family, all of whom seemed genuinely confused about why I was objecting to having my address used for business purposes without my consent. "I'm upset that decisions keep being made about my property and my life without anyone asking me first," I said. "We're family," Marcus said. "We don't need formal permission for every little thing." "Using my address for business purposes isn't a little thing." Harold pulled out his legal pad, apparently ready to solve the problem with more financial planning. "What if Marcus designates a portion of his earnings specifically for business-related household expenses? That way the commercial activity directly benefits the household." "That doesn't solve the insurance liability issues," I explained. "Then we'll adjust the insurance policy to cover business activities," Harold said reasonably. Problem solved. I realized that for every objection I raised, my family had a solution that involved me taking on more financial responsibility and legal liability. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Janet. "HOA emergency meeting tonight at 7. Your situation is the main agenda item." Looking around at my living room, which now contained Tyler's toys, Emma's baby equipment, Marcus's business materials, and Cassidy's maternity clothes, I wondered how I was going to explain to my neighbors that none of this had been my choice. But as I watched Tyler carefully coloring a picture that he planned to give me and Emma, taking her first tentative steps while holding onto my coffee table, I realized that extracting myself from this situation was going to hurt innocent children who had done nothing wrong. The trap wasn't just legal and financial anymore. It was emotional, and it was getting stronger every day. I waited until everyone was asleep before making the phone call. It was nearly midnight and the house was finally quiet except for the soft sounds of Harold's snoring from my bedroom and Emma's occasional whimpers from her crib in the hallway. I sat in my car in the driveway, having retrieved the business card that my coworker Linda had given me months ago. Kelly Martinez, private investigator, specialized in family disputes and fraud cases. Kelly Martinez. A professional female voice answered on the second ring. "Ms. Martinez, my name is Burley Morrison. I need help with a family situation that's gotten completely out of control." "What kind of family situation?" I spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything that had happened over the past week. Kelly listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated she understood the severity of my predicament. "How quickly do you need documentation?" she asked when I finished. "As quickly as possible. I'm losing my job, my neighbors are filing complaints, and dangerous people know where I live because of my brother's debts." "I can start immediately," Kelly said. "But I want to be clear about what we're dealing with. This sounds like a coordinated effort to establish permanent residency and financial dependency. These patterns don't usually happen by accident." "What do you mean?" "Your family's actions show sophisticated knowledge of tenant rights benefit systems and legal residency requirements. Someone planned this very carefully." The implications of her words made my stomach clench. "You think this was premeditated?" "I think we need to find out. Can you meet me tomorrow after work? I'll need copies of everything. Mortgage documents, insurance policies, any paperwork your family has filed using your address." After I hung up, I sat in my car looking at my house, which glowed with warm light from every window. To anyone passing by, it would look like a happy family home. but I now understood I was living in the middle of what might be an elaborate fraud scheme. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the law office of Lisa Chen, who specialized in property law and tenant disputes. Kelly had recommended her as someone who could provide legal options beyond traditional eviction procedures. Lisa Chen was a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who listened to my story with the focused attention of someone who'd seen similar cases before. "The challenge we're facing," she explained, "is that your family has established multiple legal claims to residency at your property. Evicting family members with children during a pregnancy creates additional complications." "What kind of complications?" "Courts are reluctant to displace children and pregnant women even when the housing situation was established without the property owner's consent. We need to build a case based on fraud rather than simple eviction." She opened a legal pad and started making notes. "Tell me more about the financial arrangements they've established without your permission." I explained about Harold's attempts to change my insurance policy, Marcus's use of my address for official business, and the various government benefits being applied for using my household information. "Identity theft," Lisa said, writing quickly. "Insurance fraud. Potentially welfare fraud if they're misrepresenting household income and composition. Can we use those charges to get them removed from my property?" "Absolutely. Criminal activity provides grounds for immediate removal regardless of family relationships or residency claims." I left Lisa's office feeling hopeful for the first time in days. That afternoon, I met Kelly at a coffee shop near my workplace to hand over documents and discuss investigation strategy. Kelly spread the paperwork across our small table, examining each item with professional interest. "Your father's insurance fraud is the most promising starting point," she said. "Making changes to financial policies using someone else's identity is a felony. Even family members can be prosecuted for this." "What about Marcus's business activities?" "Running an unlicensed financial consulting business from a residential property is problematic on multiple levels, especially given his criminal background in financial fraud." Kelly made notes in a small notebook. "I'm also going to investigate this coincidental timing of everyone needing housing at exactly the same time. Multiple family members facing simultaneous housing crises often indicates coordinated planning." Over the next 3 days, I covertly documented everything happening in my household. I recorded conversations about financial planning, photographed Marcus's business activities, and saved copies of all mail being delivered to my address for other family members. The evidence was overwhelming. Harold had indeed been forging my signature on insurance documents. Marcus was actively soliciting clients for financial services while on parole for financial crimes. Cassidy was applying for government benefits using deliberately misleading household income information. "This is much bigger than I initially thought," Kelly told me when we met again. "Your family hasn't just been freeloading. They've been systematically committing multiple types of fraud using your property and identity." She handed me a thick folder containing her preliminary findings. "Your brother has been planning this housing arrangement for at least 6 months. I found emails he sent to friends discussing his strategy for getting my sister to support the family well before he lost his job. He planned this. The unemployment appears to have been voluntary. He quit his construction job specifically to become eligible for benefits and create a housing crisis that would justify moving in with you." I stared at the email printout, seeing Marcus discuss me like a financial resource rather than a person. In one message, he described my guilt complex about family as something that could be leveraged for long-term housing security. "What about my parents?" "Also involved in the planning. Your mother has been researching tenant rights laws and strategies for establishing permanent residency. She knew exactly how to make it legally difficult for you to remove them." The documentation showed months of preparation, including research into my salary mortgage payment and property value. They'd calculated exactly how much financial burden I could handle before reaching a breaking point. "They've been scamming me," I said quietly. "They've been running a sophisticated fraud operation using family relationships as cover," Kelly corrected. This level of coordination and planning constitutes criminal conspiracy. Lisa Chen was equally disturbed by Kelly's findings when we met the following day. "This evidence changes everything," she said, reviewing the investigation report. "We're not dealing with family members who need temporary help. We're dealing with criminals who've targeted you specifically for financial exploitation. What can we do?" "File criminal charges immediately. Identity theft, insurance fraud, welfare fraud, and conspiracy charges will allow law enforcement to remove them from your property, regardless of any residency claims they might have." That evening, I sat in my car outside the police station holding Lisa's paperwork and Kelly's evidence folder. Once I walked through those doors, there would be no going back. My family would face serious criminal charges that could result in prison time. But as I thought about Tyler's innocent face and Emma's first steps, I realized that protecting those children meant stopping their parents from continuing to commit crimes that would eventually destroy their family anyway. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the police station and asked to speak with Detective Cooper, who Lisa had said specialized in family fraud cases. "I need to report multiple crimes being committed by my family members," I told him, "and I have extensive documentation to support the charges." Detective Cooper listened to my story with the patient attention of someone who'd handled similar cases. When I finished explaining the situation, he nodded grimly. "This is definitely criminal behavior," he confirmed. "And you're not the first family member we've seen targeted by this type of systematic fraud." As I handed over Kelly's evidence folder, I realized that what I'd thought was the worst week of my life was actually just the beginning of getting my life back. Detective Cooper assigned the case, immediately recognizing the urgency of my situation. Within 48 hours, he'd begun building a comprehensive criminal investigation that went far beyond what I'd initially reported. "Your family's activities have attracted attention from multiple agencies," he explained when he called me at work. "The insurance fraud your father committed triggered an automatic investigation by the State Insurance Commission." "How serious is that?" "Insurance fraud is a felony that carries significant prison time, but that's not all we've discovered." He arranged to meet me that evening at Kelly's office, where they'd been coordinating their investigations. The conference room table was covered with documents, photographs, and what appeared to be surveillance reports. Kelly spread out a series of photographs showing Marcus meeting with various people at coffee shops and restaurants around town. "Your brother's consulting business is much more extensive than you realized," she explained. "He's been actively soliciting elderly clients for investment advice, specifically targeting people with significant retirement savings. But he's on parole for financial crimes." "Exactly," Detective Cooper said, "which makes his current activities a violation of his parole conditions and potentially a new set of felony charges." Lisa Chen had joined the meeting with a stack of legal documents. "We've also uncovered evidence that your family has been running similar housing scams on other relatives." "Other relatives?" "Your cousin Jennifer in Phoenix, your Aunt Linda in Denver. The pattern is identical. Sudden housing crisis, emotional manipulation, establishment of legal residency, then systematic financial exploitation." I stared at the documents showing official complaints from family members across 3 different states. "How many people have they done this to?" "At least 6 that we've identified so far," Detective Cooper replied. "Your case is the most recent, but it's also the most extensively documented thanks to your investigation efforts." Kelly pulled out another folder. "There's more. Your father's financial manipulations extend beyond insurance fraud. He's been using your address to apply for credit cards, claiming to be an authorized user on your accounts." She showed me credit applications bearing Harold's signature and my address requesting cards with high spending limits based on my income and credit score. "I never authorized any of this." "Which makes it identity theft," Detective Cooper confirmed. "A federal crime that the FBI will be very interested in prosecuting." Lisa pointed to another set of documents. "Cassidy's benefit applications also contain fraudulent information. She's claiming to be a single mother with no household income support, while actually living in a home where multiple adults contribute to expenses. Even though I'm the only one actually contributing to expenses, I pointed out. That's welfare fraud, Detective Cooper explained. She's receiving benefits based on deliberately false information about her living situation and available support. The scope of the criminal activity was staggering. What I'd thought was a family housing arrangement was actually an organized fraud operation involving multiple felonies across several jurisdictions. What about Tyler and Emma? I asked. What happens to the children when their parents are arrested? Social services will be involved, Detective Cooper said gently. But that's actually better for the children than continuing to live in an environment where their parents are actively committing crimes. Kelly had been quiet during most of this discussion, but now she pulled out what appeared to be the most damaging evidence yet. This is the part that's going to upset you the most, she warned. We've discovered that your family has been planning this operation for over a year. She handed me a series of printed emails and text messages between Marcus Patricia and Harold dating back to before Marcus quit his construction job. In the messages, they discussed my promotion at work, my house hunting activities and strategies for getting Burley to support the family permanently. Patricia had researched my salary range and calculated how much financial burden I could handle. Marcus had deliberately sabotaged his employment situation to create a crisis that would justify the housing arrangement. They targeted me, I whispered, reading through the communications. They've been watching your life and planning this takeover for months, Kelly confirmed. This wasn't a family emergency. This was a premeditated crime. Detective Cooper leaned forward in his chair. The good news is that this level of premeditation actually strengthens our case significantly. These communications prove conspiracy and intent, which elevates all the other charges. What happens now? We execute arrest warrants tomorrow morning, he said. We've coordinated with the parole office social services and the federal investigators handling the identity theft charges. Lisa consulted her legal notes. Once the arrests are made, we can immediately file for emergency removal of all unauthorized residents from your property. The criminal charges supersede any residency claims they might try to make. I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Tomorrow morning, my house would be cleared of family members, but Tyler and Emma would potentially be placed in foster care while their parents faced serious criminal charges. Is there any way to protect the children from going through the trauma of seeing their parents arrested? I asked. We're planning the arrests for early morning when the children are likely to be asleep, Detective Cooper assured me. Social services will have child advocates present to handle the transition as gently as possible. Kelly gathered up the evidence files. Burley, you need to understand that what you've been through isn't your fault. These people are sophisticated criminals who've been running this operation on multiple family members. You're a victim, not an enabler. As I drove home that night, I realized I was returning to my house for the last time while it was occupied by people who'd been systematically destroying my life. Tomorrow, everything would change. But sitting in my driveway, looking at the warm lights in every window and thinking about Tyler's bedtime story requests and Emma's first attempts at words, I couldn't help wondering if I was making the right choice. Then I remembered Marcus's emails describing me as a resource to be exploited, and Harold's calculations of how much money he could extract from my financial situation, and I realized that protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was the only way to prevent them from continuing to hurt other people the same way they'd hurt me. The arrests happened at 6 a.m, just as Detective Cooper had planned. I was waiting in Kelly's office, having spent the night at a hotel, to avoid being present during what I knew would be a traumatic scene. It's done, Detective Cooper called to tell me at 7:30. Harold and Marcus are in custody. Cassidy is being processed separately due to her pregnancy, but she'll also be facing charges. What about the children? Tyler and Emma are with a social worker who specializes in emergency child placement. They're safe, and the transition went as smoothly as possible under the circumstances. I felt simultaneously relieved and heartbroken. The children were innocent victims of their parents' criminal behavior, but they were now separated from everything familiar while their world fell apart around them. Lisa Chen arrived at Kelly's office with a stack of legal documents and a satisfied expression. Judge Williams granted our emergency motion for immediate property restoration, she announced. You can return home today and your house is legally cleared of all unauthorized residents. What about their belongings? They have 72 hours to arrange for retrieval of personal items under police supervision, she explained. Everything else is considered abandoned property. Kelly had been monitoring news reports and social media coverage of the arrests. The story is already attracting significant attention, she told me. Multiple news outlets are covering it as an example of sophisticated family fraud. She showed me a news article headlined, "Local Family Arrested in Multi-State Housing Scam." The story described the criminal conspiracy and mentioned that I'd been cooperating with authorities as a victim rather than a co-conspirator. This is actually good for you professionally, Kelly explained. It clearly establishes that you were targeted by criminals not participating in illegal activities. Detective Cooper arrived with additional updates. The federal investigation has expanded significantly. Your family's communications contained references to at least 12 other potential victims across 7 states. 12 other people. Apparently, this housing scam operation has been their primary source of income for several years. They move from one family member to another, establish residency, exploit resources, then move on when the situation becomes unsustainable. The scope of the criminal enterprise was staggering. What I'd experienced wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a systematic pattern of exploitation, targeting family members with stable incomes and properties. Your cousin Jennifer in Phoenix has already contacted us, Detective Cooper continued. She went through almost identical circumstances with your parents 2 years ago. I had no idea. They're very sophisticated about isolating their victims and preventing communication between family members who might compare experiences. Lisa consulted her notes. The criminal charges are extensive. Harold is facing federal identity theft charges, state insurance fraud charges, and conspiracy charges. Marcus has parole violations, plus new financial crimes charges. Cassidy is looking at welfare fraud and conspiracy charges. How long could they be in prison? Harold could face up to 15 years if convicted on all charges. Marcus could face 10 to 20 years as a repeat offender. Cassidy might get a reduced sentence if she cooperates with the investigation. That afternoon, I returned to my house for the first time since the arrests. Walking through the front door felt surreal. The space was exactly as I'd left it, but it felt completely different knowing that I was finally alone. Kelly had arranged for a security company to change all my locks and install a basic alarm system. The criminal associates who were threatening Marcus might not realize he's been arrested yet, she explained. Better to be cautious. As I walked through each room, I could see evidence of my family's occupation. Tyler's toys still scattered in the living room, Emma's high chair still in the kitchen, Marcus's business card still on the dining table. But there was also evidence of the criminal activities. Harold's forged insurance documents were spread across my desk. Marcus's client list for his illegal consulting business was pinned to my refrigerator. Cassidy's benefit application paperwork was stacked on the coffee table. My phone rang with a call from my supervisor at work. "Burley, I just saw the news reports about your situation," Mr. Anderson said. "We had no idea you were dealing with criminal family members." "I didn't know they were criminals either," I replied honestly. "HR wants to schedule a meeting to discuss reinstating you on the Meridian account. It's clear now that you were a victim rather than someone with questionable associations." The relief was overwhelming. My professional reputation was being restored as quickly as it had been damaged. That evening, Cassidy called me from the county jail. "Burley, please," she said, her voice shaking. "I need you to understand that I didn't know how extensive their planning was. I thought we were just asking family for temporary help." "Cassidy, I can't talk to you without my attorney present." "I want to cooperate with the investigation," she said quickly. "I can provide information about other families they've targeted, but I need help with Tyler and Emma. They don't have anyone else." The mention of the children hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything their parents had done, Tyler and Emma were innocent victims who needed protection and stability. "What kind of cooperation?" I asked carefully. "I can testify against Marcus and your parents. I have recordings and documents showing how they planned everything. But I need someone who cares about my children to help navigate the custody situation." After I hung up, I sat in my quiet living room, finally experiencing the peace and solitude I'd been craving for weeks. But instead of feeling purely relieved, I found myself thinking about Tyler's laugh and Emma's bedtime routine. Kelly arrived that evening with final paperwork and an update on the investigation. "Cassidy's cooperation is going to be valuable," she explained. "She has evidence that could help convict the others and protect additional potential victims." "What about the children?" "That's complicated. Social Services is looking for appropriate placement, but Tyler and Emma don't have other suitable family members available." The implication was clear. If I wanted to help protect Tyler and Emma, I would need to consider becoming involved in their custody situation. "You don't owe those children anything," Kelly said gently. "You've been victimized enough by their family." But as I looked around my empty house, I realized that Tyler and Emma were the only truly innocent people in this entire situation. They were victims just like me, except they had no power to protect themselves. The decision I was facing would determine not just my own future, but the future of two small children who had already lost everything they'd known. 3 weeks after the arrests, I stood in Judge Williams' courtroom, watching justice finally being served. Harold was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for identity theft and conspiracy charges. Marcus received 15 years as a repeat offender for financial crimes and parole violations. Patricia, who had initially tried to claim ignorance about the criminal activities, was sentenced to 8 years after evidence proved her central role in planning the conspiracy. This case represents a particularly troubling example of family members exploiting trust and emotional bonds to commit serious crimes. Judge Williams stated during sentencing, "The systematic nature of this criminal enterprise and the vulnerability of the victims demand significant consequences." Cassidy, who had cooperated fully with the investigation, received 5 years of probation and community service in exchange for her testimony. She would also be required to participate in financial literacy and parenting programs. Detective Cooper met with me after the sentencing to provide updates on the broader investigation. "Your family's arrest led to the discovery of the largest family fraud network we've ever encountered," he explained. 12 additional victims have come forward, and we've identified fraud totaling over $200,000 across multiple states. $200,000. "Your case was actually one of the smaller financial impacts because you stopped it relatively quickly. Some victims supported these criminals for years before realizing what was happening." Kelly had been documenting my recovery process for potential use in victim advocacy programs. "Your decision to investigate and report the crimes prevented them from targeting additional family members," she pointed out. "You've quite literally saved other people from going through what you experienced." The validation was important. For weeks, I'd struggled with guilt about the consequences for Tyler and Emma. But understanding that my actions had protected other potential victims helped me recognize that I'd made the right choice. My professional life had recovered completely. Not only was I reinstated on the Meridian account, but I'd been promoted to senior account manager after my supervisor learned about my courage in exposing the criminal conspiracy. "What you went through demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity and problem-solving ability we value in our senior staff," Mr. Anderson had explained during my promotion review. The neighborhood situation had also improved dramatically. Ms. Crawford from the HOA had personally apologized for the violation notices, and several neighbors had expressed admiration for how I'd handled such a difficult family crisis. "You showed real strength in a terrible situation," Janet had told me. "Most people would have just suffered in silence and let their family destroy their life." But the most significant change was my relationship with Tyler and Emma. After extensive evaluation by social services, I'd been approved as their temporary guardian, while Cassidy completed her probation requirements and parenting programs. The children have already formed a strong attachment to you, the social worker had explained, and you're clearly committed to their welfare despite everything their parents put you through. Having Tyler and Emma in my home was completely different from the chaotic family invasion I'd experienced before. This time, I'd made the choice voluntarily with proper legal framework and support services in place. Tyler had adapted remarkably well to the new living situation. He was thriving in preschool and had stopped asking about his father, though he still occasionally requested to call his mother. Emma was taking her first confident steps and had begun calling me Burly Mama, which melted my heart every time. The house felt alive with their presence, but in a way that enhanced, rather than destroyed, my sense of home and independence. You've created exactly what a healthy family should look like, Lisa Chen observed during one of our legal consultations about the guardianship arrangement. The children have stability and security, but you maintain your autonomy and decision-making authority. 6 months after the arrests, I received a call from Detective Cooper with surprising news. Your family's crimes have attracted attention from federal investigators studying family fraud patterns, he explained. They want to interview you for a national database of victim experiences. What kind of database? Documentation that will help law enforcement and social services identify similar criminal patterns before they cause as much damage. Your case is being used as a model for how victims can successfully fight back. The FBI interview was both emotionally difficult and professionally validating. The investigators were particularly interested in the sophisticated manipulation tactics my family had used and how I'd managed to gather evidence while living under the same roof as the criminals. Victims in these situations usually feel too guilty and confused to take action, the lead investigator explained. Your ability to recognize the criminal behavior and build a case while protecting innocent children is extremely rare. A year after the ordeal began, I found myself testifying before a congressional subcommittee about family fraud and victim protection. My experience had become part of proposed legislation to strengthen penalties for criminals who exploit family relationships. Family members who commit these crimes cause particularly deep trauma because they violate the most fundamental bonds of trust, I told the legislators. But victims can fight back successfully when they have proper support and legal resources. After my testimony, several other family fraud victims approached me to share their own stories. Many had endured years of exploitation because they didn't understand that their family members were committing serious crimes. Your story gave me the courage to finally report my brother's financial abuse, one woman told me. I thought I was being a bad sister, but now I understand I was being a crime victim. Kelly and I had begun collaborating on a victim advocacy program that provided resources and support for people dealing with family fraud situations. Your experience demonstrates that it's possible to protect yourself while also protecting innocent family members, Kelly explained during one of our program presentations. You don't have to choose between family loyalty and personal safety. The program was already helping dozens of victims across the state, and we were receiving requests for expansion to other regions where similar crimes were being reported. But perhaps the most meaningful validation came from an unexpected source. Cassidy wrote me a letter from her halfway house, where she was completing her probation requirements. I want you to know that what you did saved not just yourself, but Tyler and Emma, too, she wrote. They're thriving in ways they never could have if we'd continued down the path we were on. You showed them what a stable, healthy home actually looks like. She was working toward eventual reunification with her children, but under strict supervision and with extensive support services. The criminal charges had forced her to confront the dysfunction that had allowed her to participate in the fraud conspiracy. I'm learning to be the kind of parent Tyler and Emma deserve, she continued, and I'm grateful they have you to show them what family loyalty actually means, protecting people you love, not exploiting them. As I read her letter while Tyler and Emma played safely in my living room, I realized that standing up to my family's criminal behavior hadn't destroyed our family relationships. It had revealed which relationships were worth preserving and which were built on manipulation and exploitation. The children would grow up understanding that love and loyalty mean protecting each other's well-being, not enabling destructive behavior. And I had learned that protecting yourself from family manipulation isn't selfishness. It's often the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. 1 year after the arrests, I stood in the same courtroom where my family members had been sentenced, but this time I was there for a very different reason. Cassidy was completing her final probation hearing, marking the end of her criminal supervision period. Ms. Morrison has consistently met all requirements of her probation. The supervising officer reported to Judge Williams. She has completed financial literacy courses, parenting classes, and 100 hours of community service. Her housing is stable, her employment is consistent, and her relationship with her children has improved significantly under supervised visitation. Judge Williams reviewed Cassidy's file carefully. Ms. Morrison, you've made remarkable progress over the past year. Your cooperation with the criminal investigation helped protect numerous potential victims, and your commitment to rehabilitation has been exemplary. I sat in the gallery holding Emma on my lap while Tyler colored quietly beside me. The children had maintained regular contact with their mother throughout her probation period, and their relationship had gradually strengthened as Cassidy learned healthier parenting skills. Your Honor, Cassidy said when invited to speak, I want to thank the court for giving me the opportunity to rebuild my life properly. I also want to acknowledge my sister-in-law, Burley, who protected my children when I failed to protect them myself. The formal proceeding concluded with Cassidy being released from probation with a clean record. She'd successfully completed all rehabilitation requirements and had no further legal obligations related to her criminal charges. Outside the courthouse, Cassidy and I sat on a bench while Tyler and Emma played on the nearby playground. I know this is going to sound strange, Cassidy said, but going through the criminal justice system was probably the best thing that could have happened to our family. How do you figure that? It forced me to confront how dysfunctional our family patterns were, she explained. I grew up thinking that manipulating and exploiting people was normal family behavior because that's what Marcus's parents modeled. She watched Tyler carefully navigate the playground equipment while Emma toddled around the safer areas. When I met Marcus, I thought his family's ability to work the system was clever survival strategy. I didn't recognize it as criminal behavior until I was forced to examine it objectively during the legal proceedings. Over the past year, Cassidy had completed not just court-mandated programs, but additional therapy and education on her own initiative. She'd secured stable employment as a medical office assistant and was living in a small apartment across town. The children are thriving with you in ways they never did in our chaotic household, she continued. They have routine stability and clear boundaries. They know they're safe and loved. It was true. Tyler was excelling in kindergarten and had developed confidence and social skills that had been stunted in the previously unstable environment. Emma was walking and talking on schedule and showed none of the developmental delays that sometimes resulted from early childhood trauma. What are your plans going forward? I asked. I want to continue building a healthy relationship with Tyler and Emma, but I'm not requesting custody changes, Cassidy said. They're settled and happy with you. Disrupting that for my convenience would be selfish. Her growth over the past year had been remarkable. The scared, manipulated young woman who'd participated in criminal activities had evolved into someone who prioritized her children's well-being over her own desires. I'm also planning to get involved in victim advocacy work, she continued. Kelly mentioned that your program needs people who can speak to families about recognizing criminal manipulation. It was an unexpected but valuable suggestion. Cassidy's perspective as someone who'd been both victim and perpetrator could help other families identify unhealthy patterns before they escalated to criminal behavior. There's something else I want you to know, Cassidy said, pulling an envelope from her purse. I've been in contact with some of the other family members who were victimized by Marcus and your parents." She handed me letters from my cousin Jennifer in Phoenix and my Aunt Linda in Denver, both expressing gratitude for my courage in exposing the criminal conspiracy. "Your actions didn't just save yourself," Cassidy explained. "You saved all the future victims who would have been targeted if their operation had continued." Jennifer's letter described how my family had destroyed her credit score and left her financially devastated before moving on to their next target. Linda's letter detailed emotional manipulation tactics that had left her questioning her own sanity. Reading these letters helped me understand that what we did to you wasn't just wrong. It was part of a pattern of predatory behavior that had been devastating people for years. That evening, Tyler and Emma helped me prepare dinner in our peaceful kitchen. It had become our routine, Tyler setting the table while Emma practiced eating finger foods in her high chair, followed by bath time and bedtime stories. "Aunt Burley," Tyler said as I tucked him into bed. "Mama Cassidy says she's proud of you for protecting us." "What do you think about that?" "I think she's right," he said seriously. "You make sure we're safe and happy." Emma, who was still learning to talk, pointed at me from her crib and said, "Mama Burley," with a huge grin. The children had developed their own way of understanding our family structure. I was their primary caregiver and the constant presence in their lives, while Cassidy was their biological mother who visited regularly and loved them very much, but lived separately. "Are we going to stay here forever?" Tyler asked. "As long as you need a safe place to live," I assured him. "This is your home." "Good," he said, settling into his pillow. "I like it here." After the children were asleep, I called Kelly to update her on Cassidy's successful completion of probation. "It's rare to see such complete transformation in family fraud cases," Kelly observed. "Usually the criminal patterns are too entrenched for real change." "I think having to face the possibility of losing her children permanently was the wake-up call Cassidy needed," I replied. "And your willingness to maintain the children's relationship with their mother while protecting them from harmful family patterns has been crucial," Kelly added. "You've demonstrated that it's possible to break criminal family cycles without destroying all family bonds." Our victim advocacy program was now operating in 6 states and had helped over 200 families identify and report family fraud situations. My experience had become a template for how victims could protect themselves while preserving relationships with family members who were willing to change their behavior. "Have you decided whether to pursue permanent legal guardianship for Tyler and Emma?" Kelly asked. It was a question I'd been considering for months. Cassidy had made it clear that she supported whatever decision I felt was best for the children, and Tyler and Emma had expressed their desire to stay with me permanently. "I think I have," I said, looking around my home where children's artwork decorated the refrigerator and toys were neatly organized in designated spaces. The house felt complete in a way it never had when it was just mine. But more importantly, Tyler and Emma felt secure and loved in a way they'd never experienced before. "I'm going to file for permanent guardianship," I decided, with Cassidy's support and the children's best interests as the priority. "That's wonderful," Kelly said warmly. "You've created exactly the kind of stable, loving family environment every child deserves." As I settled into bed that night, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed over the past year. What had begun as the worst crisis I'd ever faced had ultimately led to the most meaningful relationships I'd ever had. I'd learned that protecting yourself from family manipulation isn't about rejecting family altogether. It's about creating space for healthy relationships to flourish while refusing to enable destructive behavior. Tyler and Emma would grow up understanding that real family love means supporting each other's growth and happiness, not exploiting weakness or loyalty for personal gain. And I had discovered that sometimes the greatest act of family loyalty is refusing to allow family members to continue hurting themselves and others through criminal behavior. The children were safe. Cassidy was building a healthier life, and the criminals who had terrorized multiple families were facing consequences for their actions. Justice had been served, But more importantly, a new generation was learning what family relationships should actually look like when they're built on love rather than manipulation. 2 years after that first shocking evening when my family arrived at my doorstep with suitcases, I stood in my backyard watching Tyler and Emma play on the swing set we'd installed together last spring. The transformation in our lives had been so complete that it sometimes felt like those chaotic weeks had happened to someone else entirely. Tyler, now 7 years old, was patiently pushing Emma on her favorite swing while explaining the rules of a game he'd invented. Emma, approaching 3, giggled with pure joy as she soared higher, her chubby hands gripping the chains with growing confidence. "Higher, Tyler, higher," she called out, and my heart filled with warmth at the sight of their sibling bond, one built on genuine care rather than the manipulative family dynamics I'd grown up with. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa Chen. "Congratulations, the permanent guardianship paperwork is finalized. Tyler and Emma are legally your children now." The legal process had taken over a year, but every step had confirmed that this was the right decision for everyone involved. Cassidy had not only supported my guardianship petition, but had actively advocated for it during court proceedings. "Burley has given my children the stability and love I couldn't provide," she'd testified. "They call her home their real home because that's exactly what it is." Cassidy had rebuilt her life completely during the past 2 years. She'd earned her associate degree in healthcare administration, maintained steady employment, and developed a healthy co-parenting relationship with me that prioritized the children's needs above all else. She visited every other weekend and took Tyler and Emma for supervised day trips once a month. The children loved these visits and had developed a clear understanding that they had 2 adults who cared about them: their guardian Burley, who provided daily care and stability, and their mother Cassidy, who loved them but lived separately. "It's the healthiest family structure I've ever been part of," Cassidy had told me recently. "The children know they're loved by everyone, but they also know that you're the one who makes the important decisions and keeps them safe." Kelly's victim advocacy program had expanded nationally and was now being used as a model by law enforcement agencies across the country. I'd been invited to speak at conferences about family fraud prevention and had co-authored a guidebook for victims that was being distributed by social services departments. "Your willingness to share your experience has helped hundreds of families recognize and escape similar criminal situations," Kelly had told me during our most recent program evaluation meeting. "The most rewarding part of the advocacy work was receiving letters from people who'd found the courage to report family crimes after hearing my story. One woman wrote that my experience had helped her understand that her brother's financial exploitation wasn't her fault and that she deserved protection from family members who were hurting her. My professional life had flourished beyond anything I'd imagined possible. The promotion to senior account manager had led to additional opportunities, and I'd recently been offered a position as regional director with a significant salary increase. Your experience managing a complex crisis while maintaining your professional responsibilities demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership ability we're looking for," my new supervisor had explained. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's criminal conspiracy had ultimately advanced my career by forcing me to develop skills and resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The neighborhood had also embraced our little family completely. Tyler was friends with several children on our street, and Emma was a beloved presence at the community playground. Ms. Crawford from the HOA had even asked me to serve on the board, recognizing my experience with crisis management. "You've brought such positive energy to our community," Janet had told me recently. "The children's laughter in your backyard reminds all of us what family joy should sound like." Harold and Marcus were both serving their sentences in federal prison. According to Detective Cooper, neither had shown significant remorse or acceptance of responsibility for their crimes. "Some people never learn," he'd explained during his last update. "They still see themselves as victims of circumstances rather than perpetrators of serious crimes." Patricia had died of a heart attack during her second year in prison. While I felt sad about her death, I also felt relief that Tyler and Emma would never have to navigate a relationship with someone who had viewed them as tools for manipulation rather than children deserving protection. It's okay to feel complicated emotions about family members who hurt you, the family therapist I'd consulted had assured me. You can grieve the loss while also feeling grateful that the threat to your children's well-being has ended. The most unexpected development had been my romantic relationship with Alex, a fellow victim advocate I'd met through Kelly's program. He was a social worker who specialized in helping children recover from family trauma, and his understanding of our unique situation had been invaluable. Most people don't understand how family criminals operate, he'd told me early in our relationship, but you've proven that victims can not only survive but create something beautiful from the wreckage. Alex had proposed last month in our backyard while Tyler and Emma played nearby. The children had been part of the planning, helping him choose the ring and prepare a speech about wanting to officially join our family. "Will Alex be our daddy now?" Emma had asked after the proposal. "Alex will be someone who loves you and takes care of you along with me," I'd explained. "Our family keeps growing with people who care about us." Tyler had been more analytical about the arrangement. "So now we have Mama Cassidy who visits and Burley who takes care of us every day, and Alex who wants to help take care of us too." "That's exactly right," I'd confirmed. "That's a lot of people who love us," he'd observed with satisfaction. The wedding was planned for next spring, with Tyler serving as ring bearer and Emma as flower girl. Cassidy would be present as their biological mother, and Kelly would be my maid of honor. "You've created the kind of blended family that actually works," Lisa had observed when I'd told her about the engagement. "Everyone's role is clear. The children's needs come first, and the adults have learned to cooperate instead of compete." As evening approached, I called Tyler and Emma inside for their bath and bedtime routine. They ran toward the house with the easy confidence of children who knew they were safe and loved. "Aunt Burley," Tyler said as we walked inside, "my teacher wants to know if you can come to our family presentation next week." "What kind of presentation?" "We're supposed to tell the class about our family and how it's special," he explained. I smiled, thinking about how Tyler would explain our unconventional but loving family structure to his classmates. "I'll definitely be there," I assured him. After the children were asleep, I sat in my living room reflecting on everything that had happened over the past 2 years. The space that had once felt chaotic and invaded now felt peaceful and purposeful. The bookshelf held children's stories alongside my professional books. The coffee table displayed Tyler's artwork and Emma's favorite puzzles. The dining table was set for tomorrow's breakfast with colorful plates and cups that made the children smile. My house had become a home in the truest sense, not because it was filled with family members, but because it was filled with people who genuinely cared about each other's well-being and happiness. I'd learned that setting boundaries isn't about rejecting family. It's about creating space for healthy relationships to grow. Real love doesn't demand sacrifice of your safety, dignity, or future. When we protect ourselves from manipulation, we actually protect our capacity to help others authentically. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is refusing to enable their destructive patterns. True family supports your growth, not your destruction. The criminals who had invaded my home claiming family loyalty had taught me what family actually isn't. Exploitation disguised as love manipulation, presented as tradition, and demands for sacrifice without reciprocity. But Tyler and Emma had taught me what family could be: mutual support, shared joy, protective love, and commitment to each other's flourishing. Cassidy had learned the same lesson through her legal consequences and rehabilitation. She discovered that real motherhood meant prioritizing her children's needs over her own convenience, even when that meant accepting that someone else could provide better care. As I turned off the lights and headed toward my bedroom, I could hear Tyler and Emma sleeping peacefully down the hall. Tomorrow would bring another day of school drop-offs and playground visits, bedtime stories, and family dinners. It was exactly the life I'd always wanted but had never known how to create, until circumstances forced me to fight for it. The family that had tried to destroy my independence had ultimately taught me that independence isn't about living alone. It's about having the strength to choose who deserves access to your life and your love. Tyler and Emma had earned that access through their innocence and their capacity for genuine affection. Alex had earned it through his respect for our family's journey and his commitment to supporting our continued growth. Cassidy had earned a place in our extended family through her willingness to change destructive patterns and prioritize her children's well-being over her own desires. The criminals who had demanded access based solely on blood relationship and emotional manipulation had proven they didn't deserve it. I'd learned to distinguish between family members who enhanced my life and family members who exploited it. The difference wasn't about biology or history. It was about character and choices. As I drifted off to sleep in my own bedroom in my own house surrounded by people who loved me authentically, I realized that sometimes the most devastating crisis can become the foundation for the most meaningful happiness. But it only works when you have the courage to protect what matters most, even when that protection requires making difficult choices about the people you love. What about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity? How did you find the courage to protect yourself while still maintaining your values about family loyalty? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges. Don't forget to share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about how family boundaries can actually strengthen relationships rather than weaken them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, protecting yourself isn't selfish. Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people who deserve your care.